For this micro lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about firefighting, some of the strategies and types of equipment that are used in fighting forest fires. And because the perspective of forest fires has changed over time, with prescribed burning becoming more prevalent and firefighting strategies evolved, there's a number of different elements to discuss related to firefighting strategies. Over time, or in the last 100 years or so, forest fires have actually dropped. In the earliest part of the century, forest fires were much more frequent, with as many as 500 fires reported per day that apparently burned up around 20 million acres of forest annually. Today, only around 1.5 to 2 to 4 million acres have been burning in recent years due to advancements in fire prevention techniques and also fire prevention strategies and educational campaigns like the Smokey the Bear. The 5 major causes of fire on national forest lands or forest lands in general are arson, debris burning, lightning, machinery, and actually smokers. A lot of people think that campfires cause a majority of forest fires, but that's simply not true. Only about 3% of all forest fires are blamed on accidental campfires. Actually, arson and debris burning that gets out of hand make up the lion's share of the major causes of forest fires. There are 3 elements to the fire triangle that are used in firefighting theory or firefighting strategy. If you're able to take out one of those corners of the fire triangle, you'll be able to put out that fire. And any fire needs 3 things. It needs a fuel, it needs something for ignition, and it needs enough oxygen to keep it going. So if a firefighter is able to get rid of one of those corners, you'll be able to put out the fire. There are different levels of humidity versus ignition risks that are taken into consideration when for firefighting activities or prescribed burning, and also to gauge the threat of fire on national forests. You may have seen the fire risk signs or fire danger signs posted outside of your national forests, and basically they have a lot to do with humidity, drought, and wind speed. Any humidity over 95% poses little to no risk of a forest fire. Humidity levels of 45 to 60% are still a low hazard, but at the lower end, at that 45% range, some campfires can become dangerous if they're high winds, or if for some reason a campfire were to get out of hand. But that is a good range for doing prescribed burning. 35 to 45% humidity is the ideal condition for prescribed burning. The fuels burn rather easily, but it's not so dry as to cause major concerns, because anything below 35% you have a much higher hazard risk. At that level, the fuels are much drier, and fires can get out of control, and little spot fires or spot fires or prescribed fires can get out of control pretty rapidly. A couple of rules governing fire in forests. Fires typically burn very quickly up steep slopes. As terrain increases in slope, wind turbulence increases, which can lead to more intense fires gathering steam more quickly. Southern slopes tend to have more frequent fire outbreaks and tend to spread more quickly because southern slopes are the slopes facing the sun and tend to dry out. Your fuels on southern slopes tend to be a little more dry and have a greater potential for ignition. Abrupt wind shifts are very common when cold fronts move through. Anytime you have a frontal system moving in, a fire risk can increase due to the amount of wind and the shifts in wind. And blow-up fires is just a term used to describe an abrupt transition from a low-intensity fire to a high-intensity fire. And these are just some terminology, or this is some terminology you need to be familiar with in discussing forest firefighting. There's a number of different firefighting tools and strategies that are used. Backfires are commonly lit to burn towards a wildfire, which creates a buffer of burned ground. If you're able to burn the fuels in a controlled manner before the actual wildfire gets there, then you've created a buffer and gotten rid of anything that the wildfire could burn. Prescribed burning is used, of course. The principal tool used with the prescribed burning is the drip torch, which you see there on the right, which can start very low level, a low level fire when the conditions are right. But drip torches are also a tool used in firefighting to start those backfires. Fire breaks are often dug to produce a physical barrier for fire, to keep the fire from moving from one forested area or one particular area to another. And these types of gullies are either cut by hand or with small equipment. You're basically just making a physical boundary to keep fire from jumping from point A to point B. Fire towers are used for spotting particular fire areas. They're not used as much as they were used historically, but fire towers are still important in the western states. These days, they're here in the southeast. They're used a lot for tourism on public lands, but they can be important tools in triangulating fire and determining where exactly particular fires are. And of course, the most glorified aspects of firefighting include smoke jumpers, which are trained personnel that carry a lot of equipment into the field and jump out of planes or helicopters to kind of start some of the initial groundwork on firefighting.